Do you own or rent your home? Sure you do, and I'll bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowner's or renter's insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico Easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
This is the Andy Pollin Hour on Washington's new home for sports. ESPN 630, the sports capital.
And Kevin Miller now from behind the goal. Dumps in, and now they shot, and they score, and they win it. Ilya Samsonov left the goal crease. And Craig Smith tucks it in for the game-winning goal in double overtime. A miscue by Samsonov after a stellar night. It ends up with an overtime winner for Boston. Final score, 3-2, and the Bruins take a 2-1 lead in this series.
Another heartbreaking playoff loss from our Washington Capitals. Mike Callow here in for Andy Pollin on the Andy Pollin Hour and the Tony Kornheiser Show coming up at 12. So you get 2 hours of me, Mike Callow, of course, if you have listened to me with Andy or with Bram every afternoon right here on ESPN 630 from 3 to 6. You know I am somewhat of a Caps expert. I produce their broadcast. I am friends with everyone involved there. And, of course, host of Capitals Radio, Ben Raby, will be joining me at 25. But last night's game was like clockwork. We get an early puck drop, a 6:30 puck drop, a weird one in these parts. We never get that puck drop time, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, 6:30, we're gonna, get the game over with, out the door by like 9:30, not have that crazy stressful, try to fall asleep so you can get up fast enough next morning. No. The Caps do not care about your schedule. You get a double overtime game in Boston against the Bruins, and they're going to lose. Exhale when it comes to this team. It's never easy and never has been easy, but just a 2-1 series lead for Boston right now. I want to start with that from the beginning yesterday. If you were listening to Bram went through some of the moves happening as puck drop was about to approach yesterday. Craig Anderson, who was great in the Caps' first game in relief of Vitek Vanacek, who still did today with a lower body injury, started game 2, was pretty good. Definitely wasn't his fault on the loss on Monday. It comes out yesterday that Ilya Samsonov is going to start. Ilya Samsonov has not played since May 1st. He was suspended off of missing a team activity or being late to a team activity with Evgeny Kuznetsov. And Craig Anderson is out, as the company line would say, quote, body maintenance. Look, I've heard a million injury things in the past and in the present. I've never heard about body maintenance. I haven't been into the gym for 2 years because of, quote, body maintenance then if we're going to play this game. Like, I don't know what that is. Craig Anderson turns 40 tomorrow. Maybe that has something to do with it. But here's a guy who has pretty much alluded to that he's going to retire at the end of the year. Has been with the Ottawa Senators for so long, and he signed on with the Caps taxi squad. Was a great soldier the entire season. Only got 2 starts. Came in relief 2 other times. I really thought it was his job to take it the rest of the way until the Caps were bounced or maybe he gets hurt. I've never heard body maintenance used to keep a player out. And I want to clarify this too. He was not just not starting. He was not backing up. The backup last night was Phoenix Copley, who's never started a game with the Capitals. I think he has 2 starts with the St. Louis Blues when they traded him there, and then they traded back for him. And he's been in Hershey basically ever since. We start off with that Ilya Samsonov gets into the game. He largely plays amazingly. The Caps were under siege the entire first overtime last night. I think he had 17 saves in just the first overtime alone. He was the reason why they were alive last night in that game. And as you heard in the highlight there, John Walton, Capitals Radio Network from last night, a simple miscue on the puck in double overtime. The Bruins potted in, and it's over just like that. And if you have heard me speak about the goaltending situation all season long, it has been that Vitek Vanacek and Ilya Samsonov do not have that veteran savviness, that veteran presence to make the smart play all the time. They give up too many rebounds. Both of them do. Samsonov is the more talented one out of the two. But last night was an example of what happens when you have a young goaltender and they have one mental lapse. This has been the story for the entire series now. The Capitals have a mental lapse, and the Bruins just take advantage. Game 1 was fine. They won in overtime. They get a nice deflection from Nick Dowd off a TJ Oshie shot to win that game. And then what happens in Game 2? They are nursing a lead in the third period, and John Carlson has a piss-poor effort against Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall takes it right by him, jams it to the front of the net, and eventually the Bruins get it through, and the Bruins win in overtime. Very fast in overtime. That's just what happens in hockey. When you have all the momentum, you win. And what happens last night? Almost the same exact thing. The Caps get a lead from Nick Dowd, and then Nick Dowd takes a terrible penalty in the third period. The Bruins tie the game up, and then it goes to overtime. And apparently when it goes to overtime, the Bruins turn into a super team, by the way. They go nuts. It's like they can smell the blood in the water, and all of a sudden, the Capitals are stuck in their own zone. And so last night's game, just a brutal example of how the series has gone so far, in that the Caps largely have played very well. Probably better than I expected them to play, but they're still nursing now a 2-1 series. They're not leading, but a Bruins 2-1 series lead. Just a brutal turn of events for this team. My feeling on this is that Capitals have probably used up all their luck already, and they're looking at a 2-1 deficit. And we'll see. We've seen crazier things that have happened. The Caps, I read this morning, the last 5 times they have been down 2-1 in a series, they've won. They've come back and won all 5 series. So they had that going for them, but at the same time, that magic has to end somewhere. Most likely it's this year. Also, to go back to the lineup before last night's game, and it's just it's a laundry list for them of what's going wrong. Lars Eller hurt out. Lars Eller, one of their best two-way centers, if not the best two-way center on the team, not named Nick Backstrom, out last night. That thrust Evgeny Kuznetsov into the lineup. Kuznetsov had a terrible turnover in the first period that almost led to a Boston goal. He cannot be doing that. I'm not shocked there. He's shaking off the rust. But this is what's been happening now with the way the injuries are going. TJ Oshie doesn't look 100%. I'm going to say this too. Nick Backstrom doesn't look 100% either. He doesn't have a point yet in the entire series. So things just look like they're duct taped together for the Caps right now. It looks like it's toothpicks and masking tape at the moment for them on how they have kind of gotten through this series, and they've won a game. And you know what? I think maybe there is some thinking. If there's more to this Craig Anderson thing, that maybe they just think he wasn't going to be the answer. Maybe they throw in Ilya Samsonov thinking, if we're going to steal a series, it's going to be through this guy. And Samsonov, largely very good last night, but that one screw-up, man, that's a big screw-up. That's a bad one. Mike Callow here in with you on the Andy Pollin Hour. Also in for TK coming up 11 to 12. Of course, if you're listening to us, if you get out of your car, you can always listen to us on your smart speaker, on your Alexa. Just tell her to play ESPN 630 The Sports Capital, and you can always listen to us at sportscapitaldc.com. That's CAPITOL, capital.com, not like the hockey team. More on the Caps as well, though, with this whole Ilya Samsonov, Evgeny Kuznetsov story. This was kind of buried not only locally but nationally on what these two guys have done. Kuznetsov has had a history of this now, of just having not off the ice problems. I wouldn't say problems is a strong word. It makes it sound like he's like this terrible person. I would just say immature activities probably is what we're getting to with Evgeny Kuznetsov. He got in trouble a couple years back with being filmed with cocaine on the table, most likely in Las Vegas. I think that's what that was alluded to. And then he tested positive for cocaine after that video came out. It's worth noting the NHL does not suspend you or ban you for that. They ban you for bad behavior and stupid behavior, and basically he got banned for being caught on video with having that. And then what happens in New York? I mean, a couple weeks back, the Tom Wilson stuff stole all of the headlines. And if I'm Kuznetsov and Samsonov, I'm sending Tom Wilson, an Uber Eats gift card or something, because it distracted everybody from what the real problem was here. It was that you had a 29-year-old center that has 3 years left on his deal, who made a really immature decision and ended up getting him and his young goaltender in trouble, and this team not to have them for the end of the regular season into the playoffs. So that got buried, and now we have to kind of go game by game because of the way the Caps injuries are. Tom Wilson, good on distracting everybody from what happened here, but most likely the Caps are going to move on from Evgeny Kuznetsov this offseason, and I'm guessing they're hoping that lights a fire under him, that maybe they get a little more out of him than they thought they would in this playoff run. But as far as Samsonov goes, though, he's the goalie of the future. He was really good in 2019 into 2020 when he was backing up Braden Holtby. I mean, I remember I was kind of pining for, if the playoffs were going to start at a certain time, to have him play instead of Braden Holtby. And, of course, the season got cut short due to COVID. But that brings us to Samsonov's offseason activities, where he got on an ATV in Russia. His ATV crashed, and he had a back injury, and he couldn't play in the bubble. And you wonder if they could have relied on him in the bubble. Maybe you put him in over Braden Holtby, and maybe Braden Holtby, takes a back seat and Samsonov steals the series against the Islanders, or they look a little more, energized. Who knows there? I don't think they beat the Islanders last year, because I just think Todd Reardon was completely outmatched by Barry Trotz. But either way, Ilya Samsonov could have been your answer last year. I'm hoping this is Samsonov's wake-up call, that a coaching staff is literally saying, you're our last option again here. We need you. Maybe don't make so many boneheaded decisions. Maybe stay in D.C. Over the summer and work on yourself. But the Caps are going to go as far as these two Russians can help them in the lineup. As far as what some of the other guys have done up and down the lineup, the fourth line for the Caps last night, largely awesome. Garnet Hathaway, another point last night. Nick Dowd had another goal last night. A very good game from the fourth line of Garnet Hathaway, Nick Dowd, and Carl Hagelin. It's worth noting, they did not get broken up the entire regular season. They played every single game together, all 56 games, were never moved up and down their lines. If anything, Nick Dowd might have been double shifted here and there, but that line stayed the same, and they've been the Caps' best line. And Nick Dowd giveth, Nick Dowd taketh away last night, though. He's had a really good season, career high in goals. But last night he had the game winner, and then he ends up taking a bad penalty and causing the Bruins to tie the game. Just a brutal turn of events for the Caps these past two games. And I don't want to say same old Caps, because it's not. I think these injuries have caught up to them largely, and I think they've actually elevated their play so much. But I think the Bruins have honestly just been messing around, and they have a 2-1 lead. And that's where, if you're a Caps fan, you feel a little discouraged. The Caps have given more than their best effort probably against the Bruins, where the Bruins have gotten better every single game. Each game they've improved. Each period, honestly, they've improved. And then, like I said at the beginning of the show, when overtime hits, they turn into a bunch of sharks. They just completely take over the game. The Caps were holding on for dear life in overtime last night, and Ilya Samsonov held on to them. In the second period, second overtime, things had kind of settled down. Not that the scoring chances were going either way, were lopsided one way or the other, but the screw up by Ilya Samsonov just sucks. And I tweeted last night, though, every second that those overtimes were going, the Caps' chances were going down. They're the oldest team in the league, and there's just no way that they were gonna really get better as the game went on with the Bruins' young legs. As far as the Caps stars in this one, though, Alex Ovechkin finally got on the score sheet yesterday with a goal, 2 really good assists, though. He had 2 goals that were tipped in games 1 and 2, so. Good for Alex for getting on the score sheet. He's now got 800 goals with regular season and playoffs combined. So the grade A continues to climb up those boards. TJ Oshie really good last night as well. You can tell he's not 100%. I will say this, too, if you want a bright spot heading into Friday, the Tom Wilson, Anthony Mantha, Nick Backstrom line was fantastic. That second line hopefully stays intact. Anthony Mantha hasn't gotten a goal yet. Had a really good assist last night on the Ovechkin goal, primary assist for Mantha. Mantha has been driving play. He, kind of like the Bruins, has gotten better every single game. Got to remember, this is his first playoff run being in Detroit before being traded here. In Game 1, looked a little tentative, looked a little calm. Game 2 was driving play, had a ton of scoring chances, couldn't quite finish. Last night, more of the same, but at least he was in on that Ovechkin goal. I look for Anthony Mantha to have a breakout game come Friday. He's gotten better every game, and if they're going to even up the series, it's going to be by him. So positive if you need it there. I know I'm probably sounding really negative in the first 10 minutes of the show, but the Caps have given out their best effort. If they can keep it going, maybe there's a shot in a 7-game series. Once again, Mike Callow here with you on the Andy Pollin Hour. ESPN 630, the Sports Capital, in for Andy, in for Tony, coming up at 11. Ben Raby of Capitals Radio will join me at 10:25 for more on the Caps. I'm actually, by the way, doing a Throwback Thursday on my show today. I think I had a show on a Thursday a couple weeks back, and I never even thought of it. That's a normal occurrence on the Bram Weinstein Show if you listen to us from 3 to 6. But 2012, my Throwback Thursday today. If you've ever listened to me in the past, 2012 was one of the most action-packed years in DC sports in my lifetime, in this young 31-year-old's lifetime of this city, that we had a first ever Nats playoff run in 2012. We had the Caps get past the defending Stanley Cup champion, then Boston Bruins. Haha, that's why I'm doing 2012 here. In a Game 7 overtime game, not unlike how this series has been going. And, of course, you had all the Wizards action happening that year as well. And I've gone this long and not even mentioned the Wizards. The Wizards fighting for their playoff lives today as they have to play the Indiana Pacers tonight to stay alive in the playoffs, or at least make the playoffs. And if they do win, they would lock in the 8 seed and play the 76ers. That one tips off at 8 o'clock. I've asked a question here on Twitter to some people. Would you rather have the Wizards beat Indiana tonight and push the 76ers to maybe 5-6 games and have Scott Brooks come back? Or would you rather just have them lose tonight and we cut Scott Brooks loose for good here? Let me know. You can tweet at me at ESPN630DC or at Mike_Callow if you have a thought on that, because I know what I would take right now. I've yelled and screamed now for 3 weeks about Scott Brooks needs to go. His rotations suck. The other night, Jason Tatum drops 50, and they had no answer for him at any point in time. Didn't try to trap him. Didn't try to double team him. You would think after a guy scores like 30 points, you think, maybe if we stop that guy, we'll have a chance to win. No interest in stopping Jason Tatum the other night. And props to him. He took exactly what the Wizards gave him, which was everything. And the Wizards fell to the Celtics 118-100 the other night. So when it comes down to it, my faith in the Wizards, it doesn't even matter what happens tonight, but I just want Scott Brooks gone. And if you've been following too these last couple of weeks, Daniel Gaffer has been a force at center. He has been able to take over games at times, and Brooks will take him out and then not put him back for a long time. And it is just irking the hell out of me because Tommy Shepard clearly got a nice player at the deadline. No one really thought anything of it, especially just thinking that, here's this guy from the Bulls. It's a reclamation project. Let's see what ends up happening with him. And he ends up being really good in the minutes that he's been given, and that's the problem. Scott Brooks hasn't been giving him any minutes. So, like I said, Wizards playing game tonight. A nice week here with the play-in games, with the Caps playing the Bruins, especially with the way it's timed out too. Caps Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, of course, with the Wizards. And then, of course, you have the Nationals too playing in regularly. We'll get into that later on in the 10 o'clock hour. Got some thoughts there from Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer has some thoughts on Eric Fedde, as Eric Fedde came out yesterday. The Nats are dealing with their own, second COVID outbreak now. They're not at the 85% vaccination threshold, but Eric Fedde vaccinated, tested positive, and then Tanner Rainey, relief pitcher for the Nats, did test positive, but he doesn't have the vaccine, and Eric Fedde has to go on the IL. So Max Scherzer has some thoughts on there, and I largely agree with what Max is going to say about Fedde having to go on the IL, even though he's asymptomatic. We'll get into that in just a little bit. And coming up in about 8 minutes, Ben Raby from Capitals Radio and the Capitals Radio Network. More on the Caps and the Bruins. But we'll also later on in the show get into some Washington football team business. Of course, the Morgan Moses situation here, as he's most likely out from Washington, either by cut or a trade. Moses, no salary left on his deal, and he has been granted permission to seek a trade. And we'll see if Washington gets anything for him. The roster purge that Ron Rivera has gone through, we'll run all through that in the 11 o'clock hour, as well, as Ron has basically taken no prisoners when it has come to his roster. And good for Ron. 3-13 roster when he took over, improved them to 7-9. And basically is doing a full-blown you're either with us or against us attitude. But back to the Capitals as well. Friday, another 6:30 puck drop in Boston. Game 5 set for Sunday night, 7 o'clock at Capital One Arena. And, let's say the Caps do make things, interesting and keep it into a long series. I don't know. I like the Caps' chances going forward if they keep the same effort. I just think the Bruins have a little bit too much right now with what's going on with them. Mike Callow here in on the Andy Pullen Hour. Ben Raby is going to join me up here next. This is ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Welcome back. Andy Pullen Hour. Mike Callow here with you on the Andy Pullen Hour and the Tony Kornheiser Show. Trying to wrangle Ben Raby here. We're having some phone issues here on ESPN 630. Nice elongated break there. Thanks for sticking around. If you did, I'll try to get Ben, if not here, maybe next hour. I did get a tweet on the Wizards from Spencer. He adds, continuing to guard Tatum with a 6'2 guard sporting a bad hamstring, waiting too long to sub in Garrison Matthews for an ice-cold Raul Neto, and a Davis Bertans to the tune tune of 3 made three-pointers all game. Fire Scott Brooks, whatever it takes. I have to agree with Spencer here. I would rather just get rid of Scott Brooks, move on with the Wizards when it comes down to it out of that effort and what was going on for this team. And we all know that there's not really any championship aspirations, especially with no Bradley Beal. Your best player on the team is hurt with a hamstring injury. It's about the best it's going to get for this team. And if they were fully healthy, we probably wouldn't give them much more of a shot. But coming off what they are, there isn't really much of a chance. Mike Caller here with you, Andy Polenauer, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Ben Raby may be going to join us in just a little bit, but we'll see what's going on there. I'm going to move over to the Washington football team and what has gone on here in the past couple days. And that begins with Ron Rivera and what is going on with Morgan Moses. And the purging of the roster here is legit insane. If you follow Al Galdi, who I used to work with here in D.C., he had an extensive list of how this roster has turned over. And here is how the list goes from Al. In the past 17 months as the Washington football team head coach, the following players have been purged from the roster: Trent Williams, Dwayne Haskins, Alex Smith, Colt McCoy, Jordan Reed, Chris Thompson, Adrian Peterson, Darius Geis, Paul Richardson, Ryan Kerrigan, Josh Norman, Quentin Dunbar, Monte Nicholson. He also then says he ran out of room, and he adds Nick Sundberg on that, and also the football operations people, including Eric Schaefer, Kyle Smith, and Paul Kelly. And Al adds, I don't know that Washington football has ever had a house cleaning this drastic. So I agree with Al here. This is Ron Rivera's show. And seeing all of those names in one list is crazy. And to be fair, Dan Snyder probably never lets this happen because he has his own favorites on any given roster. And, you know, he has his guys. And even in the Trent Williams scenario, Trent never kind of knocked what Dan had done with him. He said that he was very helpful the whole time. He was basically blaming it on Bruce Allen. And in this case, though, there are no favorites anymore. It is all about Ron Rivera. It is all about, you know, how he wants to run the show. And from the beginning, we've gotten the instance that it's basically you're with us or you're against us, or here's exactly what's happening. You know, what do you want to do from here? Because there are cases where guys like Quentin Dunbar and Trent Williams went to him and basically, you know, asked what was up. And he said, you need to prove yourself to Trent. And Trent goes, I'm a million-time Pro Bowler. I've proved myself. I don't want to do that. And he goes, okay, we'll go ahead and trade you. Same thing with Dunbar. Like, you're either with us or against us. Okay, we'll trade you to Seattle. And then things occurred with Dunbar in the offseason. Not that you can control stuff like that. And same thing with the guys like Darius Geis. Like, they play themselves out. Monte Nicholson, part of that too. So that one's not shocking. But you look at some of those names, though, like Ryan Kerrigan and Adrian Peterson. I think we're part of the same set there. Peterson cut late in training camp last year. The writing was kind of on the wall for Peterson, too, that he wasn't a ball catcher, that he was just a pure running back. He wasn't the type of guy that Rivera really wanted. And I think it's, too, Ron knows that there's a power dynamic with some of these players. I mean, even look at the Alex Smith story. That was the feel-good story of the entire season for Washington. And Alex kind of comes out prickly at the end of it, right? Like, wins comeback player of the year, then does kind of these weird cryptic interviews, then finally retires when he realizes nobody is, gonna sign him, and then has his kind of like little mini brigade against Washington saying they never wanted him to start and this and that. And I think Ron Rivera, by basically not making everybody happy, is building the roster that he wants. And I think Morgan Moses is just the latest in that, Moses, no money left on his deal, has been here a while. He's been the starter since 2015 at that right tackle spot. Even played a little left tackle last year. By him basically going, we've drafted your replacement. We have competition. What do you want to do? And clearly, he wants to be traded. I also think there's a hinge of competition here that Moses doesn't want to deal with. That's my opinion. I have no reporting to go off of. But Rivera has added competition at every single position this offseason if there's some kind of question mark. I mean, look at safety right now. You've got Cam Krill, you've got Landon Collins, you've got the safety that they signed from Miami that was a captain. Like, that position was set, but there's still going to be competition there. And you know what's happening here too is he's getting them set for a 17-game schedule. And Morgan Moses hasn't been 100% in the past. Him, not unlike Trent Williams and Brendan Sheriff, have played through some crazy things, and sometimes an 80% version of those guys is better than any other starter elsewhere. So, good for Ron Rivera to basically just lay it down too, that there isn't this kind of mudslinging in the media either, where they go back and forth and there's this he said, she said going out. It's very straight up. They both clearly are in clear communication with each other. So either way, I like what Ron Rivera is doing here. I like that it is his roster, and I also think I speak for most Washington football fans here when I say Dan Snyder is not in charge, and that's a very good thing going down the stretch. Bram, before he ever got hired by Play-by-Play, always had a really good point, and it was that, every team, most people don't like their owner. And I know Dan Snyder has his own type of, way of dealing with things, but I kind of compare Dan to, like, Goldilocks right now. Like, he was way too into the franchise at the beginning, making his own signings, the Bruce Smiths of the world, the Deion Sanders of the world, where he went kind of crazy, had his hands involved with everything, had the Vinny Serrato years where it was a little too much for Dan. And then what happened? Everyone said, oh, no, you have to go hands off here. What does he do? He gets Mike Shanahan and RG3, and he still meddles a lot because RG3 ends up becoming the darling of the city. And then Bruce Allen comes in, and they get a guy like Jay Gruden, and Dan largely stays out of it. And then you know what happens? Everyone goes, no, wait. We need you back. We need you back to kind of get this right, to get Allen out of here, to do whatever you want to do. And now I think we've got them, the just right mixture of Dan Snyder in this franchise. I'm not going to say that I like Dan Snyder. I never probably will end up saying that. But I do think we are at a point now where Dan knows that he's got to at least be somewhat involved and not look the other way when it comes to his team. Because when it came to the Jay Gruden, Bruce Allen era, I mean, that was middling, man. I mean, that was middling, and then things got really bad when they went 3-13. And I think everybody was kind of saying, like, somebody make some kind of change here, because it's one thing to be really, really bad, and then at least you get the high draft pick in the hope of that draft pick panning out. It's another that when you're middling and it just seems like you're going through the seasons with no direction, and that's what we were all getting with the Washington football team. So when it comes down to it, I love that we kind of have this somewhat more mature Dan Snyder. Let's throw it. I don't want to throw it out, but let's look the other way on some of the other stuff that's happening with the franchise, the suing of Bruce Allen, the sexual assault allegations against the franchise. When it comes to running his team, it seems like maybe, just maybe, we're getting a somewhat more mature Dan, because he's giving the keys over to Ron Rivera. I also think with Dan, too, he knows this is kind of not a last straw for fans, but like the erosion of the fan base is real right now. People aren't excited about, or I should say this before last year, people weren't excited about the team. People were leaving in droves. And I think last year probably did a lot of good. I mean, obviously everyone loved Chase Young. Going 7-9 and winning the division went a long way for a lot of guys. And for whatever reason, it brought some people back, and I think he knows that this is a turning point for the franchise in terms of fans and the stadium. He needs every supporter that he can get when it comes down to it. And when we look at stuff like this with Morgan Moses and Ryan Kerrigan signing with the Eagles, it means there are no favorites anymore. That Ron Rivera does have control over the entire roster, and that's a good thing for us moving forward here as Washington football team fans. As I've mentioned, I'm 31 years old here. I've literally pretty much never seen them win. I mean, they won the Super Bowl when I was 2 years old, didn't remember that, and they've won one playoff game in my, teenage to adult lifetime, and that was in 2005 with Joe Gibbs as the coach. And that sounds ridiculous now, saying 16 years later, that was the last time that they won a playoff game. It's insane that we've gotten to this point, that a generation of Washington football team fans has, basically gone by the wayside. And so the single most important thing he's ever going to do is build that stadium, and it seems like he knows that now, that he's handing the keys over to a guy like Ron Rivera. And the reason why we're still talking about this, even though he's been here for over a year and a half now, is because what does Dan do? He meddles. He drafts Dwayne Haskins in the first round, even though the coaching staff doesn't want him. Jay Gruden's coaching staff doesn't want him. And stuff like that still, was happening. And now it seems like he's out. It seems that way. But we all know that, like, this is how this franchise goes, that as soon as things start looking up, sometimes he puts his hands all over things. And we don't know if that's, going to happen or not this time around. But, it at least makes somewhat of sense that there are no favorites. It doesn't matter if you've been here for 10 years or 5 years like Morgan was. If they don't want you, they're going to let you walk, and that there are no favorites. And honestly, too, more than Moses being, given permission to get a trade, like the Ryan Kerrigan stuff kind of shocked me a little bit. That's a guy that, if that's Snyder, you sign him to maybe a little more money because he was a good soldier the whole time, and you say, yes, you're going to get some more playing time, and you go over a guy like Jay Gruden's head and say, this is the guy that you have, make sure that you play him. This is clearly not the case. And granted, for Washington, too, you have a situation where you've got two bookend defensive ends in Montez Sweat and a generational talent in Chase Young. So where were the snaps going to come from? The other thing this shows, too, is some long-term sight forward, too. They have Brendan Sheriff playing on his second franchise tag. There's no way they're going to tag him a third straight time. Maybe this frees up a little more money if he's asking for more money, that you get him re-signed. You've got to, realize he was their only All-Pro last year, and the first All-Pro since like 99, I think it was, that was going down. So in that case, you want Sheriff, and then look ahead to the future, man. The defensive line needs to be re-signed in some way, shape, or form. Starting next year, you have John Allen on his fifth-year deal. Then you'll have Deron Payne coming up after that. And then I believe it's Montez Sweat after that. So, in consecutive years, you've got to start thinking about re-signing these guys. And if I'm this franchise too, I'm looking at, do I want to sign the 30-year-old tackle, or do I want to sign the defensive tackle that's in his 20s that's probably going to just keep this defense going? My guess is you invest young and not go old. So there it is there. I do love that this is the way that they're going. No sentimental value to guys that were largely on losing teams. And to the other side of that coin, I've always said I love the guys that play really hard for the bad teams. Those are the guys that are the heroes. The Trent Williams of the world, the Ryan Kerrigans of the world, Moses of the world. But there's no reason to hold on to them for sentimental value when you're trying to win a championship here. Mike Callow here in on the Andy Pullen Hour. Coming up next, we'll do a little bit more on my Throwback Thursday of 2012. I didn't even say anything about Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen before. Pop superstar Carly Rae Jepsen. I had saved on, I wanted her on because the Canadian pop star would have been with the Canadian Ben Raby coming on the show. We might get him later, but we'll see. Coming up next, a little bit on the Nats as they are taking on the Cubs. Davey Martinez going crazy last night, and a little bit a few other things in the baseball world. This is ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Welcome back. Mike Callow here with you. ESPN 630, the Sports Capital, in for Andy Pullen and the Tony Kornheiser Show. And man, Gangnam Style to bring us in. Throwback Thursday today on my show. It's going to be 2012. Don't know about Bram later today. Of course, you can always hear me with Bram from 3 to 6 every day here on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. But God, Gangnam Style, that thing was everywhere. I don't know. And Lauren's shaking her head over here. Do you remember that too? Like, it was in arenas, and then like adults definitely didn't know how to do the dance, but kids knew every single move of it. Was that maybe Gangnam Style was like the beginning of TikTok, honestly?
I was just about to say that. If TikTok was a thing, it would have 100% went viral.
Absolutely, 100% there. So I think that was the beginning of TikTok over there with Gangnam Style. I think that was my first like old guy moment in an arena of like when that song came on and the kids knew the dance exactly. Like that wasn't the Macarena. That wasn't a simple thing. It was the weird like galloping thing, whatever. But yeah, it was nuts. I don't know if you had anything to add there.
No, it was funny.
Right.
I was in high school, so it was kind of like we had to kind of play it cool. But it was still like a super silly thing.
Got
in
it.
school.
All right, fair enough. God, you were in high school. Ugh, another old man moment for me over here. Anyways, let's get into the Nationals here for a couple minutes here at the end of the hour here, of course. In for Andy until 11, then Tony out as well today, so I'll be in there in that slot at 12 until 12 o'clock. And then 12 o'clock, we got Orioles baseball, by the way, a daytime game against the Tampa Bay Rays. First pitch, 12:35, right here on ESPN 630. Before I get into the Nats, I do want to mention this last night, too. The best storyline with the Orioles all season long, besides John Means and his no-hitter against Seattle, everybody's getting no-hitters against Seattle these days, so whatever on that a couple weeks ago. Not whatever, but you know what I'm getting at here. Trey Mancini last night, 3 for 3, 2 home runs, 5 RBI last night as he recovers from I think, colon cancer, I think is what he had last year. Didn't play at all, and now he's back this year. And with Chris Davis, being out of the lineup, it gave Mancini a legit roster spot. There's no, development issues with Mancini going on for this season, and he's going to win Comeback Player of the Year. I mean, a good effort last night. Of course, the Orioles fell. The Orioles just are one of those teams where they're going to lose games even if they get a really good effort like a guy from Mancini. But good for Trey, and every time that guy hits a home run, I'm always excited. It's going to be a great storyline all season long. But over to the Nats in Chicago. This week, they finally won one in the friendly confines yesterday with Max Scherzer on the hill, 4-3. Of course, that one didn't go without its drama. Cubs had bases loaded against the Nats a couple of times. Guys in the scoring position at the end of the game eke out a 4-3 victory behind Max Scherzer, and Max Scherzer not pushed as hard as he could have yesterday. Basically because he had pitched a complete game, and they've been riding him a lot lately. But 5 innings pitched for Max, 5 hits and 8 strikeouts. Just a casual game for Max Scherzer, and he's been fantastic all season long. And worth noting yesterday as well, Brad Hand seems to be getting back to good when it comes to being the closer. Just 1 earned run given up last night, and he's shutting the door on games lately. So this kind of 3-headed attack of Kyle Finnegan, Daniel Hudson, Brad Hand closing out the 7th, 8th, 9th innings, or in some kind of combination, seems to be working for the Nats, and their bullpen seems to be pretty good despite where they are in the standings right now. They're still in last place in the NL East, but just 4 games back of the Mets. Come talk to me when they're like 9 games back, and then I might panic. But largely not in any kind of panic mode as far as it goes with them right now. I'm not panicking. I don't want them to be 19-31 like some fans seem to be getting at, but I'm not going to panic on them. Some notes from last night's game, though. If you haven't seen this yet, Davey Martinez absolutely lost his mind again over Trey Turner and the baseline interference rule. Of course, if you remember in the World Series, I believe it was Game 6 last year, where Trey Turner was called out on a baseline interference rule, where if you run on the inside of the base track on first base, that you're automatically called out. And it's a rule that's never called, honestly. Like, umps never ever call this. In the World Series, Martinez lost his damn mind. It was when you had Trey Turner yelling and screaming. Joe Torre's right there, as Torre was sitting in the front row in Houston, and with that one, it was insane. And then Anthony Rendon hits a home run, and then nobody cares anyways. And the Nats go on to win Game 6, then, of course, win Game 7. Last night was the same exact thing. Martinez loses his mind, gets ejected, takes first base off its bearings, and chucks it into the ground. It was an all-timer from Davey Martinez. It's really funny, too. A lot of people always want Davey Martinez fired, but then when he gets fired up like that, everyone's like, yeah, that's my manager. That's my manager. So I would say for the Martinez people, pick your side, man. You can't just you can't just like him because he gets fired up from time to time. But a largely eventful series happening in Chicago. And, of course, they play again today. The Nats and the Cubs do a day game at Wrigley Field. First pitch, 2:20 this afternoon. But I wanted to get into something that happened yesterday where the Nats have had their second outbreak of COVID-19. I think outbreak might be a strong word for what happened yesterday, but it came out before the game that 2 players had tested positive, or at least 2 players were, I guess, one tested positive, one was a close contact. I believe that's what was let out yesterday. And then, of course, when the game is actually about to happen, there are roster moves that happen, because then you can just kind of assume what has happened. And it ends up being that Eric Fetty is the player who tested positive. He was vaccinated with the J&J one shot earlier this season. I believe it was when the Nats were in St. Louis against the Cardinals that they all got vaccinated. And then Tanner Rainey, who hasn't been vaccinated, had to be quarantined after being in close contact with Fetty. That's not shocking. They're both pitchers. I'm sure every room is hanging out with each other a little bit, here and there, especially in a city like Chicago. How are you not going to go out and, at least have an outdoor meal or an outdoor drink or whatever and enjoy the town a bit? But it's the corresponding move that I want to get into here, and Max Scherzer weighed in on it as well. Even though Eric Fetty is vaccinated, is asymptomatic, he has to be put on the IL. And I don't really understand what's going on there, because now you're running this dangerous line of, and if you remember too, the Yankees had, I think, 7 positive cases last week, and everyone was fine. I mean, and I remember there were a lot of people going, oh, how does the vaccine work if they're testing positive? You still test positive. The whole point of the vaccine is that you survive this virus afterwards, and that you largely don't have to go on a ventilator or go to the hospital or whatever. You can still get sick, but you are dealing with the symptoms way easier, because guess what? That's what vaccines do. Your body learns how to combat it, whatever. This isn't a science show. I was told there'd be no science in this hour. But what is the point of incentivizing players to get the vaccine if they test positive and you put them on the IL anyways? This was Max Scherzer's quote last night. We got to update the rules here. We got to start following the science, listening to what the CDC says, whether this is Union or MLB, the people above us. We have to update the protocols here. Vaccinated players are testing positive. They're asymptomatic and should be allowed to play, plain and simple. I agree with Max here. What is the point? You know what I'm getting at here. What is the point for some of these players on the fence to get the vaccine if you're saying to them, yeah, if you test positive, you've got to go on the 10-day IL or the 14-day IL? I'm with Max on this one. That you should change the rules here. And guess what? If one of those players does test positive, tell him to wear a mask and tell the other players on the field, hey, he tested positive, he's asymptomatic, try to keep your distance a little bit. We understand if he slides into second base, though, that, you're going to, for 2 seconds, be close to a guy right there or whatever. I largely, I actually didn't know this was this wasn't something that I thought about going into the season, but now that you're looking at it, it's an outdoor game. Players aren't close to each other all the time. The dugout is still outside. They're not really that close, and they don't spend a lot of time in the clubhouse. Like, if you've watched games, guys are outside for mostly the whole entire game. So I'm with Max on this one. MLB and the Union should look into the rules on this. There's no reason why Eric Fetty should be missing time, because he actually did get the vaccine and then test positive. And, I hope Fetty's fine. I hope Tanner Rainey is fine and he doesn't test positive because he's not vaccinated. But, maybe it's a wake-up call for Rainey if that he gets the vaccine, whatever. I know the Nats are not one of those teams that have the 85% threshold, and that's because players have different opinions on what they do and don't want to do with their bodies, and everyone's got their reason or whatever. But I think if you're on the fence there, it would help a lot of other players say, well, if you test positive, we're going to go ahead and still let you play because you're asymptomatic and you should be fine. So good point on Max last night. I'll wonder if that actually ends up changing as we move on with this season. Coming up next here, Mike Callow here in for the Andy Pollin Show, Andy Pollin Hour. I'm in for Tony next hour as well. We're going to get into a little bit more on the football team. Tony La Russa going full old school again. We've also got Scott Jackson with Bram from yesterday on the whole Kwame Brown drama, which is just insane. We'll get into that coming up at 11:25. And, of course, Wizards have a play-in tournament game tonight hosting Indiana. If you got any thoughts on any of that stuff, tweet at me at Mike_Callow or at ESPN 630DC on Twitter there. Hour 2 coming up next here with me, Mike Callow, on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.